Greetings, friends, and welcome to my guide on the savage soul of the creator. I will go into each of the mechanics as we make our way through the encounter. I will also try and incorporate as many different strategies as I can, but for the most part, I'll be focusing on the ones we learned in my groups that best fit our playstyle and composition. Alright, let's get started. Okay, so the first thing you want to do is put down markers in these locations: northwest, southwest, northeast, and southeast. These markers will help with a mechanic later in the fight. I'll explain in a bit why these markers will be so important. In Phase 1, the first thing Alexander Prime will do is a heavy tank cleave called Divine Spear. This does a lot of damage and hits everything in front of him. The next attack is a prey-like mechanic called Blazing Scourge. This will target 2 random DPS and hit them 3 times in succession in a small AoE around them. The damage range is extremely varied. There will be a delay after the first hit, while the second and third hit will be closer together. DPS should use defensives to be safe. I would recommend one healer taking top to bottom and the other bottom to top for which DPS to heal. This makes it a lot less confusing. While prey is going out, Alexander will target a healer for a stack mechanic called Incinerating Heat. Everyone but the prey target should stack for this. Alexander will then follow this up with a raid-wide damaging ability called Mega Holy. He will cast this 2 times in a row. Immediately following this, Alexander will channel a 2-part mechanic that will need to be avoided: Gravitational Anomaly and Sacrament. Gravitational Anomaly will put small AoEs on the ground and underneath a player. After a couple seconds, they will expand greatly and explode. There is always a safe spot in the middle to dodge this, unless someone is there. So I would recommend the party stacking on his left side and then move to the center, making everything easy to avoid. During this, Alexander will also be casting Sacrament or Radial Sacrament. Sacrament will fire 4 blasts from the cardinal directions of the boss. To dodge this, you must be on the intercardinal directions. Radial Sacrament hits everything around Alexander and requires you to be inside of its hitbox to avoid death. After Gravitational Anomaly and Sacrament, Alexander will then do another Divine Spear and Punishing Heat, so be sure to turn the boss away from the group and use heavy cooldowns. Once this is done, you will transition into Phase 2. Phase 2 is a DPS check. 2 groups of 4 adds will spawn to the west and east of the room. These groups need to be picked up and should be split somewhat evenly between the 2 tanks. Once picked up, bring them together and take these nerds to Pound Town. Burn them down ASAP, because in roughly 25 seconds, 4 more adds will spawn. These new adds will spawn in the cardinal directions of the arena, remain stationary, and only cast 1 ability, Almost Holy. After each cast, they will get a stack of magic damage up. You should split DPS and burn them down as efficiently as possible. For instance, we have our melee and Dark Knight on the west add first, then north. Our warrior and ranged is on the south, then north. We kill the east add last. You can really kill them in any order, just make sure you aren't wasting DPS or movement. After these adds are killed, 2 more adds will spawn in the middle of the arena, the General's Time and the General's Might. Both of these adds will do a ridiculous amount of tank damage. The Time will do tank busters in the form of magic, and the Might will do them physically. They must be spread apart so they are never in the green circle at the same time. Both adds will also increase the amount of damage they do by buffing themselves. The Time will cast half gravity. This will need to be mitigated, while the Might will weave in smash attacks between autos. Both hit extremely hard, so don't underestimate the amount of damage they do. If these adds are not killed within 1 minute and 30 seconds, they will become untargetable and you will wipe. Once they are dead, summoned Alexander will appear in the background and count down from 10. Prepare the party for Divine Judgment by pre-shielding. Upon reaching 5 seconds, use Tank LB3 and prepare for Phase 3. Okay, this phase will be very intimidating at first with the amount of debuffs that go out during temporal stasis, but don't worry, it's actually very easy. There will be 2 sets of debuff phases where Alexander will freeze time and you will need to move to the correct location to complete this mechanic. Before temporal stasis resolves, the entire party should be shielded and regen for the upcoming damage. The different debuffs are these. Restraining Order. Stay away from your link. House Arrest. Stay close to your link. Shared Sentence, the People's debuff. Stand next to another group member without Shared Sentence. Defamation, massive AoE around a player, plus magic vulnerability up, also known as purple debuff. So for the first set of debuffs, 3 DPS will always get a purple. The 2 tanks will always be tethered with far or close. 1 healer and remaining DPS will always get the People's debuff, and the other healer will get nothing. We have DPS call out which side they are going to while both Shared Sentence go north, one slightly to the left and the other slightly to the right. Tanks can go left of north or have one go south if it's a far tether, and the other Shared Sentence with the undebuffed healer go right of north. Once everyone is in the correct position, Alexander will stop time and the mechanic will process. To make this mechanic even easier, you can designate people to fixed locations. Always have the Shared Sentenced healer and unmarked healer go to the east of north, while the Shared Sentenced DPS and tanks go to the left. After debuffs resolve, Alexander will do Gravitational Anomaly and a Random Sacrament. Be sure to dodge these the same as before and get ready to heal everyone up as soon as possible after the resolution of Sacrament, because Alexander will follow this up with Mega Holy. This part is very stressful on healers, so be sure you are close enough to receive the proper healing. After Mega Holy, there will be a Cleave, a Tank Buster, and Cleave, so be sure to handle these the same as before. Shortly after this, more debuffs will go out. The same rules apply for this set. The only difference is that the debuffs will be placed on different people now. The second set of debuffs will be a tank and healer will always be tethered far close. The other tank and healer will always have the purple. 2 DPS will be tethered far close, while the other 2 will receive Shared Sentence. All the same rules for the last temporal stasis apply for this one. To simplify this mechanic even more, have your healer tether go to the right, the DPS tether go to the left, healer purple go to the right, purple tank go south, and have your Shared Sentence DPS call out which north side they are going to. This keeps a similar pattern with the first set of debuffs. After this temporal stasis, Alexander will then channel another Gravitational Anomaly and the opposite Sacrament. This will again be followed by a Mega Holy, Cleave, Tank Buster, then Cleave. You will then transition into Phase 4. Alexander will begin to cast Time Gate. This ability spawns 4 adds which will run into gates meant for a tank, healer, and 2 DPS. The adds with the wings are the DPS adds, the adds that resemble the general's might is the tanks, and the add that resembles the general's time is the healers. This part of the fight essentially splits the party into 2 groups. You can handle this many different ways. We have our warrior go into the tank gate and the 2 melee go into the DPS gates. Depending on your healer comp, you can send in the scholar or white mage. The outside party will need mitigation for the upcoming mechanics, so if you have an astro, send the scholar in, but if you don't have an astro, send in the white mage. Inside the different gates, you will have to kill adds. The healer is meant to keep themselves alive until the other party members kill theirs and join them. After killing an add, you will be able to help out another group member by going into their room. For the tank, they will have to live through 2 tank busters, so be prepared to mitigate these. For the melee, it's pretty straightforward. Just burn down the add as soon as possible. And as I stated earlier, the healer just simply spam heals themselves. As a healer, make sure to hit the add inside the time gate at least once so they will target you. The healer add will do about 80% of your max HP with each cast, so it can get pretty healing intensive. If any party member dies inside, you will fail this check and it will wipe the raid. Once all adds are dead, the party will be teleported outside to rejoin the other group. When you teleport out, you will be granted with 5 seconds of invulnerability, so don't worry about coming out and instantly dying to a mechanic. If you're feeling confident and going for the kill, melee LB3 right when you get out of the time gates, otherwise, save it for later. On the outside, the other party members will be placing crystals and handling a stack and tank buster mechanic. Alexander will cast Judgment Crystal on a random party member that is outside. This ability puts a marker over your head and will drop a crystal on your location. This crystal does moderate damage, so make sure the target is fully topped. You want to take these and place one on each marker. The crystals provide vision for when Alexander becomes invisible. Later in the fight, he will cast an ability called Inception. After the cast, he will disappear and then reappear on a random red circle on the outside of the arena. The crystals being placed in between the red circles will see his location. If the main tank gets targeted with a crystal, simply turn the ball slightly so that your back is to an empty spot just in case you get targeted again. You'll be able to place them correctly. Keep Alexander away from these crystals. The order of abilities is Judgment Crystal, Party Stack, Judgment Crystal, Random Sacrament, Judgment Crystal, Tank Buster, Judgment Crystal, Inception. Inception can be extremely scary at first, but it's really not that bad. Alexander will disappear, and if the crystals were placed properly, you will see a pulsing indicator. Treat this like a dive bomb. If you don't know what I mean, simply get in the middle of the room and turn your camera immediately to face the pulse. Then go left or right to the edge of the arena. Alexander will then reappear on one of the crystals and destroy it. The safe spot for Inception is the red circle beneath the crystal to the left or right. You want to be here because it is far enough away from Alexander to not die to Tetra Shatter, but not too far, making it impossible to reach him for the sacrament he casts. Right after Tetra Shatter goes off, begin running to him and get inside his hitbox. After dodging the sacrament, he will then do another punishing heat and divine spear. This is followed by gravitational anomaly and incinerating heat. When he starts this cast, stack up behind his right arm. The safe spots are really easy to find. They will always be one in the middle, behind the boss, or far left. To be safe, always go to the middle of the room, but if you don't want to disengage, go to the left. That should be safe as well. Once avoided, pull him back to the center and prepare for another Inception with debuffs. These debuffs work a little different than previous ones, but the Inception is the same. Pan your camera to face his location and then move left or right based on what debuffs the party members have. The debuffs work like this. One tank always receives purple. One healer always receives shared sentence. The other tank is always tethered to a DPS. The other healer is always tethered to a DPS. And the remaining 2 DPS are tethered to each other. So with this knowledge, you can set up a priority system. The tethered tank always goes to the right, and the purple tank always goes to the left. Healers will always go right. DPS who are tethered close to tanks and healers go right. If far tethers, they go left. And finally, the DPS tethered together will always go right unless they are far, and one of them calls where they are going. The safe spot for this is still the same, the red circle right beneath the crystal location on the left and right of where the boss drops. This part will be super spooky when you are learning it, but trust me, after seeing it a couple of times, it will be GG easy. After you see the Tetra Shatter hit, start running to the boss again because there will be another sacrament. This will mirror the previous one and have another tank buster, cleave, gravitational anomaly, and incinerating heat. Safe spots are still the same. After this, pull the boss back to the middle of the room and get ready for the final phase. Alright, so this phase is all about proper boss positioning and soaking puddles. Alexander will cast Summon Alexander and Void of Repentance. This ability will spawn 2 huge puddles on opposite sides of each other. These puddles will begin to explode and shrink within 10 seconds. There needs to be someone in sight to take the damage and soak. If there isn't anyone in it, it will explode, dealing damage to the whole raid and apply a stack of infirmity and damage down. When someone soaks the puddle, they will be hit for moderate damage on the first 2 soaks and heavy damage on the 3rd soak. That is why the 3rd soak is meant for a tank. In addition to damage, the puddles will also apply a stack of healing down and magic vulnerability up. That is why healers should not soak. After each soak, the puddle will shrink, so be sure you're aware of this and get prepared for the next soak. On the first set of puddles, we face the boss towards one. We always move clockwise. The melee and main tank will soak the one in front. This is to keep uptime on the boss. The one in the back, the off tank, and the range will soak. This positioning will also set you up for the next set of puddles, making it super easy. Once all 3 soaks are done, the boss will do another incinerating heat. The people who took the first soak can and should stack for this. Their magic vuln debuff will wear off. However, the tanks and second soak will die if they stack because of the magic vuln, so make sure you're out of it. Shortly after this, Alexander will cast Holy Bleed. This is a raid-wide damaging ability dealing high damage. Make sure people are topped and shielded properly. If needed, you can use tank LB here if you're behind. Soon after Holy Bleed, Alexander will channel 2 tank busters called Holy Scourge and Chastening Heat. This will put a prey marker over the main tank. Holy Scourge is 4 hits in succession, and Chastening Heat is a single massive hit. Simply Living Dead, Hollowed Ground, or Holmgang this. If you're going to Holmgang, you will need to be healed through the first 2 hits of Holy Scourge, then you are free to Holmgang. You will want to tank swap here about halfway through Chastening Heat's cast. Make sure to Voke after the 4 hits of Holy Scourge. Keep the boss facing where the puddle was, and after the swap, pull him to the wall. This will set you up nice for the next set of puddles paired with the laser tethers and sacrament. The next set of puddles will always spawn 90 degrees from where the previous ones were, so if positioned properly, you will already be set up for the next set. This set of puddles is significantly more difficult than the last and should be coordinated on which DPS and tanks are soaking which puddle. For example, in one of my groups, we have a melee and ranged on each puddle. A melee soaks first, then ranged, then tank. My other group has both melee on one and both ranged on the other one. So as you can see, there are many different ways to do it. Just make sure that everyone knows what's going on as a group. For these puddles, 4 tethers will go out and each DPS will receive one. After roughly 5 seconds, the tethers will begin to place small pools under the DPS. If you don't move out of them, you will take massive damage and die. The laser pools don't stay up for very long and disappear shortly after spawning. During this, you will have to soak puddles and dodge a sacrament. The boss's position being at the wall makes it so the safe spots are actually the puddles. The order of mechanics here is very scripted. 2 laser pools, first soak, 3rd laser pool, dodge sacrament, 4th laser pool and puddle soak, 5th laser pool, tank puddle soak, 6th laser pool, and then incinerating heat. When placing pools and soaking puddles, be sure to place the pools on the outside of the puddle, never in the middle. You should also designate sides for each DPS while soaking. So for instance, one DPS kites around the left side while the other kites the right. It's very easy to mess this part up, so I would highly recommend not worrying about your damage here and focus on doing the mechanic. If even one puddle explodes, it will be very hard to heal the upcoming damage and will also give the whole raid damage down, so try and not let that happen. The main tank should head to their puddle during the sacrament cast, otherwise you might not make it there in time. After this is done, there will be another incinerating heat. Handle this the same as before. This is then followed by Holy Bleed, Mega Holy, and then a Tank Buster. The goal is to kill him before you see a 3rd set of puddles. However, if you do see the 3rd set, it is the same as the 2nd. The boss should also be positioned correctly because of the tank soaking the last puddle. Simply pull him to the wall from the last puddle. Handle this set the same as before. Well guys, that's all I got. I hope this guide was helpful and will lead to some sweet first clears. Peace guys.